York, Mr. Langworthy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the witnesses for their long testimony here today and your patience. This is an interesting topic for me because I was a victim of unemployment fraud, and my prior role is chairman of the New York State Republican Party, and a fraudster and a criminal applied for unemployment insurance in my name through a previous address that I hadn't lived at for over 10 years. The Erie County District Attorney in my community also was a victim in the same fashion, where a fraudster used his name and very public profile to apply for unemployment insurance. So it was a very prevalent problem in my state, and reports indicate that billions of taxpayer dollars have been wasted due to mismanagement, fraud, and inefficient processes by the government throughout this entire pandemic. You know, when a stock brokerage loses billions of dollars of their customers' investments, the brokerage itself is blamed. However, when government does this, it's swept under the rug. The government should not be excused for losing money on this extraordinary level. Mismanagement and indiscretion to this degree is unacceptable, and it's an absolute disservice to the hardworking taxpayers that have entrusted their dollars, their hard-earned money, to this government. So, Mr. Dodaro, in my home state of New York, a report from the Department of Labor showed that throughout the state fiscal year of 2021, government wasted an estimated $11 billion of taxpayer money. The primary reason for this waste is the New York State Department of Labor was using outdated technology that it was recommended to replace not once, not twice, beginning in 2010 and again in 2015. So, Mr. Dodaro, I'd like to ask you, are there other agencies in the federal government or any state governments, to your knowledge, whose outdated technology has led to wasted taxpayer dollars to that extent? And if so, would you mind mentioning who they are?
The problems with the IT systems affected a number of states. And I don't, to what extent, and compared to New York, I'm not able to talk about that at this time. I know there were similar problems in California, for example, and we're now looking at additional states, but it was a problem affecting a lot of states.
And it was federal money coming down to the states to make these programs whole. How in the future would we hold federal agencies and state governments accountable for failing to put in place mechanisms to reduce this risk of improper payment, or actually just being so porous to fraud as so many states like New York were?
Yeah, one way would be to make sure that they implement our recommendations that we've made by the GAO, the Inspector Generals, and state auditors. The figures that you quote on New York came from a state auditor's office. State auditors in other states, California, Kansas, and others, have issued reports as well. So one way is to make sure all those recommendations are implemented. Another way is to make sure that states certify that their systems meet certain standards and that there's appropriate independent verification that those systems are now able to meet certain standards. The Department of Labor should also provide some standards to the states, but each state has its own different system and eligibility requirements, so it has to be tailored to the individual states.
Are there any mechanisms or penalties available to the federal government to prevent this sort of thing from happening again with states that won't listen to the guidance?
Not to my knowledge right now. They would have to be instituted, and I think it would be good to be able to do that.
I mean, it seems like we put ourselves in a pretty feckless position as a federal government if we, continue to allow states to ignore guidance that has been leveled on them, especially large populous states, that have a population that's open to that much unemployment benefit. We can all agree that there are losses to the tune of $500 billion is unacceptable. I think everybody in this room can agree to that. We can't allow this to occur again. We have to be way better stewards of the taxpayer dollar and take that responsibility much more seriously. But I thank you very much for your time here, and I yield back.